I'm talking about painting and not showing slides, just reading what I've written. I think the reason I don't want to show any paintings is because I'm talking about painting as kind of a whole, not particular painting. Right? We've all seen a painting. You can have the pleasure of imagining whichever one you want as I'm talking about this. So let me begin. To some, I suppose the title of this lecture, Painting is Dumb, may seem incendiary or like some terrible piece of clickbait, but I can assure you that I believe nearly everything I'm about to tell you about painting. Also, at this time, I think it's appropriate to tell all of you really smart and painfully academic types in the audience to suspend some of our inclinations as we listen to a speaker. I'm going to speak in a way that may cause you to think that I'm speaking about all paintings of all types, through all history, and from all cultures. I am not intending to do so. There will be massive holes, gaps, and some short-sightedness in my argument that I'm about to present to you. These are not invitations to intellectually destroy my lecture, or an opportunity to say, haha, now I've got him, and I'm going to spend the rest of this time carefully crafting a question that will really befuddle this guy. I mean, you can if you want, if you just can't help yourself, but know that it's okay to suspend some of your impulses every once in a while. And if you really want to psychoanalyze my lecture, you should be aware that I already know most of what I'm about to say is rooted solely in my own insecurities, and in my own particular predilections, and my own particular knowledge. Over the last 2 days of this symposium, we've looked at a variety of now outmoded communication media that were at one time the height of technology. 35mm slide projectors presented work of the Renaissance to art history classes in bright, colorful, large-scale images. VHS tapes allowed us to record our family holidays and to record episodes from television so we could laugh at the antics of Balki Bartakamos of Perfect Strangers at a later time. Laserdisc presented us with image quality yet unknown to us, but don't try to watch something like Blade Runner unless you want to get off your couch 3 or 4 times. LP records were an easily accessible and affordable means for sound reproduction. Their size gave us amazing album artwork, tons of space for liner notes, and inserted posters, stickers, patches, and other prized ephemera. And while LPs are heavy, a handful of records could easily be transported to your friend's house for a party. And photography has given us a new set of sacred and treasured objects. I am able to see the faces of relatives who have passed long before I was born, and in the cult of remembering, I am able to hold on, however feebly, to my own memories. Photography has also performed a valuable service to painting. Photography freed painting from many of its previous responsibilities to representation, portraiture, and the like. Photography allowed painting the ability to explore the outer edges of painting's own irreducible elements. Capital M modern painting would not have progressed in the way that it did had it not been for the proliferation of photography. And photography, both moving and still, as its own art form, gave artists new means of creating images that, in the paraphrased words of Walter Benjamin, could keep pace with speech. All of these once or still beloved mediums of communication were at one time the best technology available. But in painting's 40 to 60,000 year history, depending on who you ask, I suppose, I don't really have an opinion, and I don't care. All I know is painting is like really old. Painting in that time has never been the best technology for communication. Painting has never been outmoded, because painting has never been inmoded. Painting is dumb. I may be getting ahead of myself, but I should introduce who I am. My name is Robert Fifield. I'm beginning my 6th year of teaching here at Whitworth in the art department. I received my BFA from Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois, in painting, drawing, and printmaking, and my MFA from Illinois State University in painting. I say this not to evidence my credentials, but to make sure you are aware that I am a painter. And it's important to me that as I keep repeating painting is dumb, I am one. As an art maker, I have had a prolonged and meaningful interest in only one medium, painting. I have the word painting tattooed to my right arm, my painting arm. I got that when I was an undergrad. Really wanted to prove to my professor I was serious. While I have admiration for and enjoy discussing other forms of visual art, I do not aspire to make them. I paint, and I think that painting is dumb. First, painting is dumb at communication. Unlike photography, printmaking, the written word, film and video, or music and audio, the power of painting does not rest in its ability to be reproducible and widely distributed. No, the power of painting is held in its singularity, its authentic and unique objectness. Paintings require the viewer to travel to the location of the painting. This feature of painting, in turn, does not make the painting adept at communicating to a wide audience simultaneously. Painting communicates to a viewer one at a time, slowly, methodically, dumbly. In this way, painting does not demonstrate the fitness for exhibition value the same way that printmaking or photography do. Imagine publishing a book and making only a single copy. Using a painting as a means of communication is difficult also when one realizes how long the public actually looks at one in a gallery or a museum. In 2001, Lisa F. Smith and Jeffrey K. Smith studied how long people spend looking at work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. While the people they studied described the experience at the museum as, quote, incredible, breathtaking, outstanding, a thrill of a lifetime, these researchers found out that people looked at 6 of the most famous works of art in the collection for an average of 27.2 seconds, with a median of 17 seconds. Don't get me wrong, I certainly am guilty of this too when I visit museums. However, there are paintings in one museum or another that I go to specifically for, and I spend a great deal of time with them. Still, if these are the average times for great works of art, what kind of time do I have with a viewer? I can look at a painting that I've done and think to myself, this has taken me 18 months to complete. And all I can say is, thanks for looking at it for about 3 seconds. After that painting that's taken me so long to make, someone looks at it for 3 seconds and then turns immediately to me and asks, what's this about? Right? Well, look at it, just a little bit longer, right? You wouldn't be handed an essay, a film, or anything and just look at it for such a brief amount of time. To me, I think this is an aside. I need to keep to reading or else I'll get too distracted. But that the frustration I have too with painting, that I want people to look and to spend a bit of time seeing it, and in the way that I'm so jealous of like video artists who like have this duration, right? And they're like, you need to look at this for 20 minutes, and all I'm asking for is like 45 seconds, a minute, right? Anyway. So painting is dumb at communication, and the making of a painting is dumb. In painting's long history, 60,000 years, give or take a couple decades, the physical construction of a painting has not changed much. When I was beginning to think about this lecture, I sent text messages to many of my friends who are also painters to see what they had to say about painting and its dumbness. My friend Karl Rademacher said, with all these other ways to create and view images, what the hell are we thinking? Mixing paint and putting it on a surface like a expletive removed caveman? Come on. Another friend, Ben Cohan, wrote me, if you have something to say, why on earth would you paint? Pushing a stick with animal fur into piles of colorful mush before the mush dries, so you can transfer it to a surface upon which it can dry, so that someone else, likely no one, will see it and say, I understand, is a silly thing to do. In many of the other responses I received, the comparison of painters to cavemen was the most prevalent. This, to me, highlights the belief that many painters, or at least those that I know, believe that nothing has changed in painting. The issues at work in the construction of a painting today, to 500 years ago, to 15,000, to 60,000 years, remain constant. However, I do not believe that it is just the physical construction of a painting that has remained unchanged. I believe that the indexical signifiers of any painting, most paintings, well, a lot of paintings anyway, have also remained unchanged. And in this way, indexical signifiers is just my fancy Charles Sanders Peircean way of saying that the mark, the touch, the hand, the whisper of all things physically and causally related to the body and the presence of the artist have always been important. I've seen the pigment-covered hands pressed on the cave walls in Lascaux, and the same gesture in the paintings of Squeak Carnwath of this century. I find these identical hand gestures, these identical handprints, to be of identical importance, or at the very least, to be of identical signification. But is this type of sameness a positive thing, or is it simply overkill? My friend and painter Andy Messerschmidt wrote me that this notion of overkill would be, quote, as if rock and roll were to have started half a millennium ago and still striving to be a popular medium. Andy goes on to say that maybe the pigment needs to be applied with something other than a brush. This might buy painters some time. An audience might roll with these subtleties afforded by a new way of applying pigment. I believe that in this quote that Andy is referring to a broad historical context. If we look at our recent history in painting, we can find many examples of painters attempting to work through something new to advance the language of painting, to buy painting some time, in the view of the public. Impressionists, for instance, worked more directly and quickly, relying completely on the empirical relationship between vision and painting. But not long after their peak, Pablo Picasso came to repair the damage to painting that the Impressionists had caused by picking up where Cézanne had left off and developing what we now know as Cubism. And later in the 20th century, for example, we have that chain-smoking, heavy-drinking cowboy from Wyoming, played by Ed Harris in that one movie. That guy, Pollock. Whose means of dripping paint helped to buy abstract expressionism, a decade or two? But that cowboy, as is well known, was a failed second-generation Cubist, not even a tenth of the painter that his wife Lee Krasner was. I should stop, because I'll talk about why Jackson Pollock is no good for the rest of this. Still, these steps, this notion of the advancements of Impressionism, of Cubism, of abstract expressionism, these are not, I believe, what Neil Armstrong would have described in 1969 as a giant leap. No, I think these are lateral motions, the side-to-side action of a foosball player. But can there really be a new way to make paintings? And would this new way really be enough to lift painting out of its endless rut of sameness? I'm not so sure it would. And I have seen painting materials and mediums change throughout history. We have all seen painting materials and mediums change throughout history. To me, at least, I find painting medium to be of little consequence. I see no substantive difference between encaustic, latex, fresco, oil, acrylic, spray paint, watercolor, gouache, tempera, finger paint, latex, enamel, airbrush, flash, dye, alkyd, or whichever medium you are now thinking of that I haven't mentioned. And I don't see any real substantive difference in how these materials are applied. No real difference between direct and indirect painting techniques. No difference in using a brush or a squeegee or dripping and spraying. To me, painting is painting, all of it, good or bad, critically important or comically weird. Cave paintings or my grandmother's landscapes of Western Montana. Sorry. Anytime I think about my grandma, it really gets me. The primary concern of painting seems to always remain the same. This, I think still, painting being dumb at communication, painting being dumb at how we make it, this still isn't why I believe painting is done. Yes, it is a bad tool for communication, or at least there are plenty of other mediums far better suited. But that alone isn't why it's dumb. The construction of a painting has remained fairly constant throughout its history, and any innovation in production has been microscopic at best. But this is also not why painting is dumb. No, I think the best evidence I have found to know for myself why painting is dumb is in painting's inherent resistance to being outsmarted. This at first may sound as though I am suggesting that painting is too smart to be tricked, too deft to be fooled. I do not mean this. Instead, imagine that painting is an infant who has not yet developed the sense of object permanence. And you, for whatever reason, decide to take this infant to a magic show. And there, at the performance, Penn and Teller disappear an elephant. The trick is lost on the infant who believes that their rattle has also disappeared after it hits the floor and goes silent under their crib. Painting cannot be tricked because painting is itself already the trick. The illusionistic space of representational painting is the trick. The ability to create the illusion of tangible space that does not physically displace any actual volume is the trick. Simultaneous contrast of color and of form in presentational painting is the trick. When late at night in the studio, I began to have some rare thought that seemed like brilliance in relation to the particular set of problems before me on the canvas. When I, for one rare moment, feel smart in the studio and attempt to outwit painting or shortcut it, I find that the whole structure of painting, not merely the colors and shapes on my canvas, but the whole facade of painting's fakery begins to unravel. By layering my new attempt to outwit painting, by adding my own set of new tricks, this dumbness is laid bare through this double negative. When this ignorance, this unquestionable dumbness of paintings is exposed to me alone in the studio, or worse, when it is presented to the public for consumption and criticism, the work can no longer function properly. The magician has invited me to view the performance from backstage, and I, as the painter, have been exposed to the outside as the fraud I already knew I was. The hoodwinker, the snake oiler, the alchemist, the con man, the jester. I am all these things. I am these things on a good day. But on a bad day, I am worse. I lie to myself. On a bad day, I attempt to convince myself that truth is tied to my current whim, linked to my most recent flight of fancy, that truth somehow can be found in my newest swindle. Dishonest practices in painting are made apparent to me, and they are unsustainable for me. I am a combination of deep insecurity and ignorant bravado. The studio can be a difficult place where, as Agnes Martin writes, we wrestle with the dragon, not to slay the dragon, no, that's a medieval idea, but to soothe it for brief moments, to convince the dragon to pillage elsewhere so we can work in peace for a few nights. If I can scramble the words of an Oscar Wilde quote to fit what I want it to say, it's in the same spirit from the introduction to his book, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Oscar Wilde essentially writes that painting is a useless thing, and I would say I love painting intensely. So why do I paint? I don't know. It's hard. It seems really unrewarding. It allows me to communicate largely to myself, maybe other painters, some bit of the public. But I think that painting has this ability to reward honesty and to reward effort in a way that I haven't seen elsewhere. It affords me the ability to speak in the kind of metaphors that I want. I don't want to speak in any other format. But to me, I think the biggest thing is that painting is magic. And that in a painting is a three-dimensional being, as we all are, right? And I look to painting as this two-dimensional form, this single simultaneous image presented to a public all at once. This is the special magic of painting, right? That every bit of information is presented to you in an instant, right? That as the maker of this thing, I am able to remove myself one dimension from painting. I become God of this space. I am completely and wholly omniscient of the surface of the painting. I control every bit and I give it to you at one single instance. It's not like music or poetry or dance or theater or any kind of writing, right? That is contingent on some kind of time base. This is everything to you in an instant. To me, that is the most sort of critical reason why I like painting. That's sort of what attracts me to painting. I think of the book by Edwin A. Abbott from 1884 called Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions. It is under the really obscure genre of mathematical fiction. It's a novel or a novella about a square, and in this novel, essentially the square, I won't get into the details of this, but the square is hanging out in Flatland. You learn about his culture, and it's all this like really like heavy kind of like Victorian culture kind of stuff, like relationships between men and women and people of different classes, right? It's this thing some are more interested in than others, but we see that the square is visited by someone from Spaceland, a sphere, and he only recognizes a sphere because he sees in two dimensions, and so he sees the shape growing and shrinking as that sphere moves through his world. The sphere comes up and is here above Flatland, and it looks down And it sees not just into the square's home, but inside of the square's body. Right? It is completely omniscient. You look at a square, you can see its outside and its inside edges. Right? He is terrified, the square, until the sphere comes up underneath of him, lifts him up, and transports him to Line Land, where the king is in the middle of Line Land and points are moving back and forth on a single plane. He is given the vision of Line Land, this dimension removed from him. He is completely omniscient. He sees all things. He is this voice that of a figure that is not seen but heard, as he describes to these people the entirety of their world. He's omniscient, right? This, to me, is the best evidence I've found as to what attracts me so much to painting, is that I am omniscient of that space. I can, to some degree, control everything, but painting is difficult, I think, to control. I think, too, I've described that the means of painting haven't changed, and they have, right? The reasons why one culture or another paints, of course, that's changed, and it's contingent on the culture, right? It's as different as the people themselves. I find that painting affords me the ability to communicate about anything that I want. I can talk on any subject. I can comment on anything without feeling like I'm part of that group. I can talk about geography or physics or mathematics or place or identity or anything I want, and I can communicate as freely as possible. I think too that the something that's really I don't know. As we've talked in these last 2 days about these nostalgic kind of notions of outmoded media, photography, slides, records, etc. I'm reminded of a question that Toshi asked yesterday after Joe's talk, that you were wondering what's going to happen after photography changes, or what would happen if we didn't have photography anymore, or how is it changing? And all I can think is, well, it's just been such a blink of an eye of human history that we could probably be fine to go back to whatever time before. Maybe there'll be great careers in portrait painting, but I think, to me, this is really crucial when I think about painting, that I'm connected in some small way, even if it's only made up by myself. I'm connected in some way to the vast history, this connection to people of all cultures. I feel this identity, this relationship with those people who also paint. I feel that my concerns, my thinking, the way I live my life, my practice is just like them. Painting in that way makes me feel very unalone. I feel very connected in a way that I love Discogs, but a vinyl message board doesn't make me feel connected the way that painting does. Right? I am tied to these outsiders, these magicians, shaman, all of these kinds of things, right? So, anyway.
Questions for Professor Fifield? Are you ready for questions?
Yeah, let's do it.